Hey, Ken Rowan from Silver Tiger Media. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Excellent. Thank you. It's great to speak with you. Thanks so much for your time today.
Oh, you're very welcome.
Now, look, I could be wrong, but I've always thought that Fantastic Planet was the perfect album, perfect tracks at the perfect time. You would have thought that perfect tracks like Saturday's Saviour, Smoking Umbrellas, and many others would have made the album a huge success. Was it just label problems, failed promotion that had poor influence at the time?
No, it's hard to know for sure. I mean, we did sell like around 100,000, I think, of that record. Which, geez, if you sold 100,000 records now, you'd be pretty happy.
Absolutely, yeah.
But back then it was kind of like, okay, good start. Let's make another album. Was the response from Warner Brothers at the time. I think they had a little bit of a hard time with the idea of sticking with the album for like maybe a year or two. They were more of the mindset of, if you were a band and they promoted you for a few months, if it didn't really blow up right away, they were kind of like, well, we didn't get this one, let's move on. Whereas I think an album like that needed a little bit more time to kind of sink into the collective conscience of music lovers. And then I think we also had the trouble with press at the time being so focused on the grunge scene coming out of Seattle that if you didn't fit into that in a clear way, they kind of had trouble, like figuring out. A lot of writers want to, they want to group you with other bands, and they had a hard time doing that. And here we are, 20 years later. It's like maybe it took that long for people to get us. I don't know. Hard to
Perhaps
say.
it did, yeah. I mean, failure was just brilliant, and ostensibly it was a Fantastic Planet. It was just a brilliant album. I can't help but look back at the 007-esque opening to the scene of Stuck on You video and smile. Despite the track meaning, it was quite ironic to see you later working on James Bond Casino Royale track, You Know My Name.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah, that was, yeah. I actually kind of didn't even think about that, but yeah, that was just that was one of the many films that The Spy Who Loved Me was just one of the many films we were watching while we were making Fantastic Planet, and actually a mix of Stuck on You. I think it may have even just been like a rough instrumental mix. Was dubbing down in the control room that we had set up in this house. And someone had started The Spy Who Loved Me while that was rolling.
Oh, wow.
And I just happened to glance over and see the screen. And the way it was syncing up with the slow tempo of Stuck on You was just, it just really fit. And I was like, man, if we ever make a video for this song, we should rip off the, a James Bond title sequence. And sure enough, like, I don't know how long it was between then and when Warner's decided to do Stuck on You as the first single that we actually executed that video idea.
Yeah. Yep. Oh, brilliant. That's a great insight. Thank you very much. I have to ask you for myself, what ultimately led to failure disbanding in 97?
Drug abuse. That was. I mean, that in the end, that was it. That was we couldn't function as a band anymore.
Right.
We just tried to write songs, and we were so screwed up on drugs, it just wasn't happening. I think part of the reason we got to that place, though, was when we finished Fantastic Planet, which we put everything we had into it, heart and soul. We got back instead of even a reaction to the album or the music, all we got back from the record label was, we don't know when or if this is ever going to come out because we're trying to sell our label right now. So really what's going on is you guys just this album is just another asset in the long list of assets that we're trying to sell to the highest bidder right now. So that was a very tough pill to swallow for us, having put so much work into that record. So that if there was some abuse problems kind of bubbling up during the making of that record, they became kind of fully entrenched as we basically waited for a year and a half for that record to finally come out. So by the time it came out, we were already in a bad place. We managed to do a decent amount of touring that year, but it was tough going, and ultimately we just couldn't continue.
Of course. And after that, luckily, your creativity personally didn't wane at all, becoming a producer, engineer, and mixer of great acclaim. But from a personal perspective, On was quite experimental by comparison to Failure, with electronic more than guitar. But Year of the Rabbit was really gathering steam until, what happened, more label problems?
Yeah. I mean, I should write a book about major label tragedies.
It'd be a great read.
I mean, it's like the Failure one was bad. The Sony one with On, equally a heartbreaker. All that one basically just had to do with, as they call it, a regime change, where a certain team of people sign you and start developing you at a label, and then the shareholders decide that the label's not, as a whole, isn't performing well, and they fire the CEO or whoever the acting president is. Yeah. Of course, the new person comes in and they clean house. And there's another thing that happens in the music business that's really kind of tragic for artists that I don't think most people know, and that's that, if a certain person brings in an artist to a label and starts developing them, and they get to a certain place with that development, whatever it is, if that person leaves their job or is fired or goes away, no one really wants to take up that artist again, because they can never, in the eyes of their colleagues, they'll never be able to take full credit for, signing the band and breaking them, because they were already signed and they were already being developed to a certain point. So that has screwed up, I would say, quite a few lives, including mine to a certain extent, although, as you said, I've sort of been able to kind of have a separate career where I'm making records for other artists. But that certainly happened to me at least a couple times. And the thing specifically with Elektra and Year of the Rabbit is that about 2 months after that record came out, the powers that be at the Warner Music Group, which Elektra was part of, decided that Elektra wasn't going to exist anymore. Right. And they basically said, we're going to take like maybe 1 or 2 rock bands, move them over to Atlantic, and the whole staff, the entire Elektra staff was let go. And I had just, it was at that point I was just like, oh man, I knew I shouldn't have done this again.
But then what a stroke of genius with Secrets of the Lost Satellite by creating your own label.
Yeah. So at that point, I wasn't going to sign any more record deals anymore. It was like, and so I took a few years off from being an artist and just focused on producing and mixing other people at that point. And then, I kind of, every few years I get the itch to write some of my own stuff, and that's where those Ken Andrews solo records came from.
Absolutely. And when Comfort and Magnified were released on LP in 2011, is that when you started thinking about revival?
Maybe that had a small part in it. It was mostly the fact that Greg and I had become friends again, and I mean, we had sort of gotten in touch after we had both kind of cleaned up and moved on in our lives after the Failure breakup, but we hadn't really been spending much time with each other. And then we both ended up having our first kids within 6 months of each other, and that caused us to spend some more time together and kind of talk more about what had happened and the history of the band, and whether or not, because a lot of our friends and family were like kind of pushing us a little bit, like, you guys should think about putting the band back together. So we just started talking about that, and eventually it led to us getting into my studio and kind of experimenting and writing some songs, a few of which ended up on The Heart is a Monster.
Yeah, yep. Wonderful stuff, which is a brilliant album in itself. It's such a contemporary sound, but you've still captured that early essence. It's brilliant work.
Yeah, that was kind of the only thing that we decided when we were going to start working on that album in earnest, was that we wanted to make a Failure record, and, it wasn't really that hard to do, because when we kind of get into the studio and start writing, that's kind of what happens. So having a connection to the past records I didn't think it was going to be too much of a problem, because I heard it coming out right away. It was more of pleasing ourselves in terms of making something that we liked now, that we felt, had a place in the kind of contemporary music scene.
Indeed. And now, look, we're thrilled that you're coming to see us for the Soundwave Festival here in Australia. It's going to be tremendous. I can't wait to hear Hot Traveller, to name but one, live. It's going to be tremendous. Will this be your first visit with Failure?
Say again?
Will this be your first visit to Australia as Failure?
No. This will be our first visit to Australia as Failure. Kelly, our drummer, has come with another band, maybe Veruca Salt, I think. But for me, this is my first time playing in Australia and coming to Australia at all. I've never been there, so I'm really excited.
Wonderful. Oh, that'll be great. And, well, your Soundwave performances, I can tell you, are keenly anticipated. It's great news that you're coming, especially for those of us who have been busting to see you live since Fantastic Planet.
Yeah, I know. It's kind of, it's going to be, we're looking forward to it, for sure.
It'll be wonderful. And, look, I realise you're on a schedule. I could speak to you all day, and I can't encourage you enough to write that book. That'd be brilliant.
All right, yeah, I'll think about it.
Tremendous. Congratulations again on The Heart is a Monster. We can't wait to hear those tracks live, and some of the older ones would be tremendous too. Thank you for coming to see us for Soundwave.
You know what? We're supposed to be on the bill, so thank you.
It'll be great. We can't wait to catch up when you get here. It's tremendous to speak with you today. Thank you so much for your time.
All right, you're very welcome.
Terrific. Travel safe, Ken.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.